All right, here we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Chris Updike Show. Well, my name's Chris Updike. I teach full-time, just starting my podcast today. Today's show number 1. What we're looking to do is have some positive people in the local community come out, share their stories, hopefully inspire some others to, get out of their comfort zone a little bit and take that leap. Today, I have my first guest, good friend of mine, personal friend of mine, Scott Goodale. He is the head wrestling coach at Rutgers University. Scott, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Chris. Great to be with you, man.
I'd like to just take a second, just thank you for being here, being our first guest. It means a lot. You started out as a high school teacher coach. So you started out in Jackson, your hometown. Tell us a little bit how that job came up, your teaching job, how you started and got involved in coaching in Jackson.
I'm a little bit different probably than everybody else. I kind of knew what I wanted to do at a really, really young age. I knew I was going to eventually, obviously I went to Jackson, and eventually I was going to go away to college, but I always wanted to come back and be a physical educator and teach and coach. And I knew that at an early age. My grandfather coached for 35 years. My mother was an assistant athletic director at the Get School in the Jackson School District. My sister obviously now is coaching, well, maybe not obviously to the listeners, but she's a coach at Jackson for the last 20 years. My father coached everything from Little League baseball in Jackson to Pop Warner football to wrestling. So I knew at a very early age what I was going to do. I just happened to have to go away for 5 years, Lock Haven University, and then come back to Jackson and teach. My friends going through high school would always make fun of me, tell me I was going to be a gym teacher, and I would always correct them and let them know I'm going to be a physical educator / driving instructor, which is exactly what I did. I actually got a degree from Lock Haven in special education. I was in the classroom for 8 years, never really wanted to leave, even though I had a health and phys ed degree. I didn't want to go into the gym, and it wasn't until my last 3 years at Jackson I decided to do that. So just knew at an early age I was going to go away, college, come back and coach and teach at Jackson. That's exactly what I want to do. It's all I ever wanted to do, and I loved every second of coaching and teaching there. I coached football, I coached wrestling, I coached baseball, I dabbled in golf, I even dabbled in a little softball. So at that time, it was whoever's winning, I kind of jumped on that wagon and kind of hitched to it. So. But that was my whole life. That's all I ever wanted to do, and then just happened to have some really good teams, and I'm sure we'll get into it. And this Rutgers opportunity opened up, and I took it.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that high school run that you had first with the football team. You were the OC there for how many years?
I think I was the offense coordinator. I did quarterbacks with Reggie Lawrence, and I did running backs with Chris Barnes first. Then I did quarterbacks with Reggie Lawrence. Then when Mike Smith took the job, maybe it was 2002. I became the offensive coordinator. So it was about 5-6 years.
Now, you guys had some good runs there in the early 2000s, yeah?
Yeah, so we won a state championship. I think Barnes and Panicu's last year, it was 99. We went 9-2, lost to Eastern, who at that time had Adam Talaferro, Omar Miles. 2 kids go on to Penn State, great high school football players. But then those guys left for Wall. We get this guy, Reggie Lawrence, head coach, and then who we just didn't. We knew at that point we had a really, really good team. And I think that first year in 2000, we ended up number 2 in the state. Mm-hmm. And then the year after, we ended up number 1 in the state, 2001. So it was back-to-back state championship teams. Just some awesome players, Nick Castellanos, Joe Saratelli, Ray Brown, Ray Nemick, it goes on and on, Gary Edwards. Just some awesome high school football players, and those were some good times. And then, of course, Mike Smith takes over. We win we lose in a state final in 2004, win another state title in 2005.
And in 2005, that was at Rutgers.
That was at Rutgers, yeah. It was probably the most exciting high school football game. I think it was actually ranked number 1 high school football game ever at the Shore because it was 30-28, last play of the game. At Rutgers.
No time left on the
North
clock.
End zone, no time on the clock. Corey Lavin to Ruggiero for a touchdown that ended the whole season. December 5th, cold, stormy winter night. We were the last team to play, Central Jersey Group 4 at the time. But what an exciting game. And then we had a couple more years there where we made the playoffs, and then I was gone.
Now, in Jackson, too, you also were on the wrestling staff, starting out there as an assistant under Al Ayers. Was Ayers the head when you were the assistant?
He was. Ayers, he was my high school coach. First it was Dave Porfirio when I was there in the late 80s, and then it became Al Ayers. My last 2 years was under Al Ayers. I wrestled under him. And then when I got back from Lock Haven 5 years later, obviously I was the head coach still, and he knew that's something I always wanted to do. And it's interesting. This is kind of neat. The principal there now, Kevin DeGenio, was an assistant coach there. And this guy was kind of like nice enough to know I was coming back from college. Wrestling was my whole life. Loved wrestling, wanted to always coach at Jackson. He kind of stepped aside and allowed me to be a paid assistant coach. And then Kevin never coached again. I never coached. I think I might have done 1 year with him, but then he obviously became an administrator, got an administrator, now was the principal. But he stepped aside, allowed me to be the assistant coach. I think it was 95, 96 season, and that was my first year really. I helped out with football, but wasn't really on staff yet. And then I became the assistant wrestling coach during the winter, and then the rest is history. Just stayed with it for about 4 or 5 years and became the head coach.
And what year did you actually take over head coaching?
2001 was my first year
2001.
as a head coach. So Al Ayres stepped down, allowed me to be the head coach. It wasn't really wanted. It's just it was time for him to follow his. Yeah, it was time for him to go follow his kids around, but he still wanted the coach. And so we just switched roles. Nothing really changed. It was great, and we had some really, really good teams. We won our first, actually in 2000, we won our first Shore Conference. First time we beat Burke Memorial in the Shore Conference final. So that was, Al Ayres kind of ended his career winning that.
So you guys had some nice runs in there. Now, were you the head coach from 01 to 06? Is that right?
01 to 07 until I left. So 2001, we won the Shore Conference tournament. We actually lost 2 or 3 of them. Then we won 4 in a row. But, yeah, we had some nice runs, and I think started in 2005 when we really became, Jackson Wrestling's always been Jackson Wrestling.
Right.
It's always been really, really good with incredible tradition started by Bernie Ryder and Joe Pepe and Dave Porfirio, Al Ayres. So I just happened to be the next coach. And those years in 2005, 6, and 7 were some incredible years. And, not only did we finish #1 in the state of New Jersey, probably more importantly, we were finished number 3 or 4 in the country.
In the country, I remember that because you took a group out to Minnesota that one year, right?
Yeah, that was really where and really from that point on, everybody started going out of state because it was about challenge yourself against the best teams in the country. The Shore Conference wrestling, again, has a great tradition. It's always been really, really good, but we'd always beat up on each other. And I think what we did at Jackson was a little unique. We started wrestling Paulsboro on a Saturday night. We started wrestling Central Catholic on a Saturday night, High Point on it. So whoever the best teams in the state were, we would go, whether they were coming to us, we were going to them, we would wrestle, and that became fun. Then we decided, let's go out to Minnesota, and that's really where we got our national ranking. I mean, we were always, 2005, I think we were ranked 20th, and then 2006 and 7, we were as high as 3 or 4. That all became because of that trip out to Minnesota, winning at the Clash or taking second at the Clash, and that's really where we kind of blew up. And even our guys got more national recognition. I mean, Scotty Winston was always the #1 guy in the country, #2 guy in the country, but guys like Ken Carney and Sean Burns and Cohen and Swan and Kinchin, I can go on and on. Derek Russell, all became kind of like nationally known and nationally ranked. So it was good for those guys, and we always could fall back to the fact we had Southern Regional, coming up 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
So, but it was all about going out of state, wrestling the best teams in the country, which made that team really, really fun.
Right. All right. So we kind of took you, back down memory lane a little bit with the Jackson stuff. Let's talk about how the Rutgers job. How did it come up? Was it just open? Did you apply for it? Did some people reach out to you? Talk about how that happened a little bit.
So I think, and I could be wrong on this with the dates, but I think 2006, maybe 7, that program was in jeopardy of being dropped. And there may be some misconception there that Scott Goodale saved the program. I did not save the program. The coach there, John Sachi, the assistant coach, Joe Ryan, saved that program. They came up with a whole plan, gave it to the university, and you can't cut wrestling in New Jersey. It's one of the top 3 states in all of high school wrestling, so that was more of a death wish. They didn't want to do that, and they explained that to me. If I fast forward a little bit, they would explain that to me later. But those guys saved the program, and then it was about how could we, if we're going to save this program, now we got to make Rutgers wrestling relevant. It's got to be relevant not only in the EIWA conference, but around the country and in the state. So I was approached by a guy. I was still at Jackson. I loved my job. We're at the state tournament. I was approached by a guy named Bill Ard. It was actually a couple weeks before the state tournament. He asked me to come up with a 5-point plan. It's well documented at this point. I've told this story a bunch, but I did. I wrote this 5-point plan on a napkin at a restaurant, Carrabba's restaurant in Brick, with my wife over a couple bottles of wine, and it was literally on a napkin. And it was everything from recruiting to coaching staff to camps to schedule to academics. And then I put a lot of thought behind it. Obviously, I didn't want to look stupid. And then I handed it to a guy by the name of John Leonardis, who was a professor at the Petty School. Bright guy, figured he could help me out, clean it up, make it look nice. John just so happens to be my assistant coach for the 12 years now. We would go out to the national tournament every year together. We had a great friendship, so I handed it to him. I said, just make this look good. It has nothing to do with me getting a job. It's just a 5-point plan. How can Rutgers wrestling become relevant? I go to the state tournament. I see Mr. Ard, who has a son who ends up winning a state title down the road there a little bit. give it to him. He actually was a football player for the New York Giants, so he has a relationship with our athletic director at the time, Bob Mulcahy. And he says, Bob, here, Scott made up this 5-point plan. He's a wrestling coach in New Jersey with one of the best teams, number one team in New Jersey. Just take a look at it. Blah, blah. Next thing I know, I was getting a call, and it was a 6-hour interview. And I never wanted the job. I never wanted to leave. Like my mom says, oh, this is a dream job. And no, I have no dream to be the Rutgers wrestling coach at the time. We have this thing going at Jackson where I'm telling you, I'm working with you, I'm working with Frank Malta, I'm working with Drew Gibson. Every single day I wake up, I'm so excited to get to work just because it's so much fun. And I loved, at that time I moved to phys ed. I loved doing what I was doing. I loved coaching football with Smitty. And obviously I loved coaching wrestling. I had a great staff at Jackson. And I truly believed we have this team that's going to end up we could beat Blair Academy. Like we could make it, we could be the number one team in the country if things go our way. Like we're never going to really wrestle Blair, but somehow we got to find a way to get into a tournament or whatever. That's kind of my mindset at the time. And then boom, this opportunity comes up. And it went from we're going to be the number one team in the country to, man, I got to really look into like leaving Jackson. Do I really want to leave Jackson?
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're talking about. You had everything set up at Jackson. I mean, you were super comfortable there. You were on a great football staff with a great team there. You had one of the best high school wrestling teams around. And now you're like, oh, am I going to leave all of this to go to Rutgers? So what were you, when they offered you the job, I mean, what was your mindset like when you had to make that decision?
Well, it's weird. You ever see the Seinfeld episode where Costanza says all the opposite thing? Like,
yes.
I went on the interview. I went on the 6-hour interview, and I was like, you need to do this. You need to do, like, I was kind of interviewing like, this is what Rutgers needs to do to compete at the highest level. So I held nothing back. I was like, you don't have this. You have a part-time coach. You have this. Like, you have nothing really. I would never take the job unless you were going to show that you really wanted wrestling to be great here. And I kind of like halfway through, 3 hours into it, I'm like, you know what? They may make some changes here, and this may be like a reality. But at first, it was like, I don't.
There's no way.
It didn't matter to me. There's no way I'm coming here. I have everything. Plus, I have 2 little kids now.
Yeah.
At the time, Shelby and Zach, and I'm like, I love putting them on the bus. I love watching, getting them from school. I love doing all that, bringing them around our teams at Jackson. I just really love Jackson. I never thought I would leave, and then I got the opportunity, and it just, boom, it hit me one day. I could make a living just doing just coaching wrestling. I don't have to do, the whole lesson plan thing. I don't have to do lesson plans. I don't have, there were long days at Jackson. Those were 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. depending on what you were coaching. So,
yeah.
And I wasn't around my family as much. I'm like, I wonder if this gives me an opportunity to be around my kids a little bit more. And which, as it turns out, really, it was kind of the same. So, but I was like, I could just do wrestling. I'm going to just be a wrestling coach. And then I became freaked out about this. I'm going to make this team the best thing on this campus. We're going to make Rutgers wrestling so big. The university is going to have to support it. They're going to love it. It's going to become a wrestling school. That was me being like a little, I don't want to say cocky, but naive. I'm going to make Rutgers wrestling great. We're going to be a perennial top 10 program. That's the way I started thinking.
Right.
And I'm like, I told my wife, I said, I have to take this challenge. I could always come back. I could always come back and teach somewhere. And I've even thought about that. My first couple of years, I was like, I should probably just go back.
Did I do the right thing?
Yeah. So, but I was just so freaked out by the challenge, and I said, I'm gonna do it, and we're gonna make Rutgers wrestling great. And really, from that first day, when I decided to do it, I picked up the phone, John Leonardis. It just changed our lives and how we had to approach every single day. And it was just so much more than just wrestling. There was so much more. There was fundraising. There was academics. We had to change the whole culture. We had to just make it where everybody on that campus believed in Rutgers wrestling and loved Rutgers wrestling.
So that kind of, you led into my next question a little bit. How much of that family piece played into taking that job? Because you're thinking, you kind of really don't know what's involved. There's a lot more travel. In Jackson, you're 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Yep. Here, you're going away on weekends. You're traveling across country. So what's your philosophy with that, with your family and just that whole college philosophy, taking that program over?
You got to have somebody who, unbelievably supports you and is going to be there for you. So I have a great wife, right? Lisa, very well. She allowed me, and she wanted me to do this. So I knew right away she was on board with what I needed to do. And it was I tell this story all the time too. We visited the first day we got the job, August 1st, we visited 250 schools that first year, whether it was clinics, whether it was just visiting the high school, talking to coaches, or whether it was speaking at banquets. We visited and touched 250 schools in New Jersey. That's a lot of travel. That's a lot of time away. But she understood it. She had 2 little ones at home. I didn't miss much at that time, but there was a lot of travelers getting on planes, getting in the car. John and I would drive all over the state into Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, Virginia, just to visit these coaches and just make Rutgers wrestling relevant. That was our whole plan, and it was hard. It was hard, and my mindset was like, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it to the best of our ability. And as we go and as there's success, we'll start asking for more. I never cared about a facility, never cared what we were wrestling in, never cared about gear and uniforms. I just wanted to wrestle and win matches. And but do it the right way. Do it the right way and find the right guys that kind of fit what we wanted to do. And at first, recruiting was I don't want to say easy. It's never easy, but there was so much attention on Rutgers wrestling. Everybody was excited about it. We made it exciting because we were all over talking about it. And I don't know if the schools in New Jersey were ever visiting high schools, going to matches, and I was going to high school matches all over the state, up in High Point and Bergen and down in Lower Cape May, and recruiting, again, it wasn't easy, but we got some really, really good kids. We got some really, really good wrestlers, and then it kicked off our first year. We had the number 3 recruiting class in the country, as we all know, led by Scott Winston, who was a Jackson guy, which is another crazy story. But that's how it all started. That was my mindset. That was my philosophy. I had a wife who believed in it and wanted us to be great, so she allowed me to do whatever I needed to do it. And as my kids get older now, it's like, we've talked, should I come back? And they're like, hey, no way, you stay. They love Rutgers. So
that's great.
It worked out.
So talk a little bit about, you were the high school coach going to this D1 job, and I people probably bash Rutgers a lot for that, right? We took the high school guy on, and I'm sure a lot of the other coaches that you guys wrestled against were like, oh, that's great. They took on this high school guy, so we don't ever have to worry about Rutgers because the high school coach isn't going to be able to get it done. So talk a little bit about that high school. You probably got a lot of flack for that. And then some of the challenges coming into that D1 program, like the scholarship stuff. I know you had to work with the gymnastics team a little bit. Is that true? You had to work with the gymnastics team. You had to get a coaching staff. So talk a little bit about some of those challenges going from a high school program to D1, and you're getting a little flack. Rutgers is catching a little flack for it. And some of those challenges that you had going in that you knew were going to be challenges coming into the program.
Yeah, that's no one's really ever asked me this, whether on podcast or radio or TV or anything. But that's an awesome question, because that first year they hired a high school coach, right? Rutgers, they didn't care. Nobody cared.
Right.
There was a honeymoon phase, and I said this maybe once before. I would go to the national tournament, and all the coaches would be like, hey, good, because a lot of them called me to recruit Scott Winston, to recruit Burns and Carney. Hey, Goody, what's up? How's everything going? Great. So there was that honeymoon phase where nobody really thought anything of it. Oh, they hired a high school coach. What are they going to do, Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, we start getting these really good recruiting classes, and then all of a sudden those conversations started to change. And a lot of those coaches started using it against us, right? Well, they got a high school coach. What are you going to do there? Because we became relevant in the recruiting scene, because we were getting the number 3 class in the country. We were getting a lot of good guys.
Right.
So now they started using that against us, and there was still a honeymoon phase. The state was still fired up. It went about 2 or 3 years where it became the honeymoon phase was over. It was about, we're winning, and we're winning a lot of dual meets, but what are you doing at the national tournament? So that became really, really hard. That became really, really hard on me, personally, because they were right? And you always have to self-reflect, and are we doing all the right things, and what do we need to be doing better? Do I have to hire more people, which obviously at the time we had 3 guys on staff, including Frankie Egger. Now we have a full staff, which I'm sure we'll get into. But, yeah, that became really, really difficult, really, really hard, and you don't get over the hump at the national tournament, and then they're really starting to hit you. Well, he's a high school coach. And at first I took that as a compliment. Yeah, I was a high school coach. This experience you're going to have at college, and this is what I would tell recruits, is going to be the closest thing to high school wrestling, because I'm passionate about it. I love it. I want a fan base. I want to cheer. I want to pump my fist. I want to make it fun.
Right.
I want to make it fun. And I think maybe it was the 3rd or 4th, maybe Winston's sophomore year, junior year, we pick off Virginia Tech. They're number 3 in the country. And all of a sudden you could start to see it's really starting to happen. The place was packed. The rack was packed. And we're beating the number 3 team in the country. And then it's like, wow, this is the closest thing to a high school, right? There's nothing like high school wrestling.
I was at the match almost front row, and I remember like the Virginia Tech kids, when the place went a little nuts, they were looking up like, what did we get ourselves into today? Because we did not expect this today. Yeah,
so that's kind of the whole, I've envisioned that. That's what I envisioned from day one, and it was starting to happen. But you still got to get over the hump at the national tournament. And until you do that, and we finally did it with Anthony Perotti, which was incredible. That's another incredible story. Out of nowhere, he does it, and all of a sudden I become a better coach, which isn't true. I was the same guy doing the same thing, but all those talks with other coaches started to change. So, that was really, really difficult, and I know I'm kind of going off tangent here, but
that's all right. That's all right. That's what we do here. It's fine. There's no recipe here today. We just do our thing.
But that was that was a pretty hard part, And then even in some of the recruiting, I would have kids from my town, who I live in Toms River now, who trained my son, who was growing up in the club, and they would flat out tell me, "Well, you don't have any All-Americans." I'm like, "Who's this 18-year-old kid talking to me? Like, who's telling you this?"
Yeah.
And it's just other coaches. They don't have any All-Americans. So those were some hard conversations to have. Yeah, we're good. What happened to Winston? How come Winston didn't win? Well, there's a whole bunch of, Scotty was hurt. Scotty was banged up. Scotty was the face of our program. He had the burden of the whole university on his shoulders to break through and do it. There's a whole bunch of reasons. But to have a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, why don't you have All-American? That's coming from other coaches. And I get that. So, whatever. We broke through, and it snowballed. And, we've had one, then we have two, then we have two, then we have two. Now we've got guys that rank 1 or 2 in the country. So every year there's a couple All-Americans. Every year we're knocking on the door to be a top 10 program. So a lot has changed in the last 7, 8 years. Obviously, a lot has changed in the last 12 years. But we're in a really, really good spot right now.
Talk about the scholarships, how many you had coming in, and what some of those other D1 programs have, and what you had to do to kind of get on par with that.
So when I first started, and this was part of the whole 5-point plan, right, we were at 3.4 scholarships. So that means 3.5 kids on our team are on some type of money. Now in wrestling, you could split it up. In football, for the people listening, football, you're on a full ride, you're on a full ride. Once you touch, you're on a scholarship. You don't break them up. There's no partials. It's a full ride. But wrestling, we were at 3.4 in my first year. So obviously every single day, I was the pain in the butt with the athletic director. I don't know what type of language we can use on this podcast, but I was the pain in the butt with the athletic director. We have to get our scholarships up, so I went all over with donors, dinners. I ate a lot of good food all over the state. We got to get scholarships. And it came to the point where our budget was good enough because everybody loved wrestling. They gave us a lot of money, but we weren't allowed to use it for scholarships. And I made this plea, why don't you allow us to use it as long as we pay for women's scholarships? So those first couple years, we went from 3.4 to maybe 5.4. We got 2 scholarships, but I had to give women's sport.
Now, that's some out-of-the-box thinking, right? No other coach in the country is probably going to go, listen, if you give us 2, give the girls 2 also. No other coach is going into a program and saying that, listen, we want 2, but I also want you to give the girls program. No one else is doing that. You're thinking out of the box a little bit with that. And give yourself a little bit of credit. Well, a little bit. Yeah. Not a lot, a little bit.
a little bit. But I honestly didn't even think we had that money. I just said it. I just need 2 more scholarships. We got to go and get this kid.
Right.
And as it turned out, they're like, okay, if you're going to do that, and then we did a little work to do it. I don't even know. I'm sure they got their scholarships, obviously. But we got it to about 5.4, and then Tim Pernetti gets hired and falls in love with wrestling. And that's the one thing I feel good about is every time an athletic, I've been through 4 athletic directors, I've been through 4 football coaches, I've been through 4 basketball coaches, 9 strength and conditioning coaches, 10 academic advisors. Everything's changing there. Rutgers has been in the news quite a bit, right? So I get to know them all, and I love, I fall in love with the football coach. Here I'm going to practice, and I'm involved in their program, and they're involved in our program. Same with basketball, and I bring my recruits to those guys because basketball, football run the, they're supposed to run the engine. And but even with our athletic director, Tim Pernetti, young guy, played football at Rutgers. Everybody's, he's just a football guy. Wrestling's gonna, furthest thing from the truth. He became a wrestling guy, and immediately his first year on the job put us at fully funded 9.9. So we have 9.9 scholarships. Penn State has 9.9. Iowa has 9.9. College wrestling programs, if you're fully funded, you get 9.9.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at. And that's because of Tim Pernetti. And obviously with the whole Mike Rice situation and basketball, Tim was released of his duties as a athletic director. And then we get Pat Hobbs, who his first day on the job is in our gym in the rack, and we're wrestling Nebraska. Number 4 team in the country, and we beat him. He's a basketball guy from Seton Hall. He immediately becomes a wrestling guy because he sees the potential of the rack. 7,000 people. We beat Nebraska, and we go from there. He's become a huge wrestling fan. But yeah, we're at 9.9. I still rob Peter to pay Paul. If I'm going to get summer school funding, I still give gymnastics money. We still do that because of Title IX and all that stuff. And we're in the Big Ten. We haven't gotten that money yet. We'll get that money in 2021. I believe, but until then, we're going to do whatever it takes to give our our guys the best resources. And if that's putting 30 guys on some type of scholarship in the summer, we're going to do that. If we have to help another team, we'll do it.
Now, what year did you guys go to that 9.9?
I think that was Pernetti's first year. So, man, off the top of my head, I'd probably be wrong if I said 2012, 2011. So we've been fully funded. We weren't all the way fully funded out of state. It was more of an in-state thing. And then there's now the whole cost of attendance where kids can get paid. So we're at that point now. So I want to say 2011, 2012, we became a fully funded program.
So you going into the program, you know, like some of the things that you have to work on. After you get in there and you're kind of in the trenches doing your normal thing, what are some of those unexpected things that pop up that you had like no idea? You were like mind blown about a little bit.
Yeah,
because you know that happens.
Yeah,
right?
It does. Like I always said this, coaching at the high school level was the most gratifying thing, right? Because you could take a kid out of the hallway, Frank Anderson, right, who would be great, or you could make him great for 3 months, and that was the biggest surprise. Those kids at Jackson, they freaking loved to wrestle. It didn't matter. I mean, they'd be sick. They'd be out of school. You're not allowed to go to practice if you miss school. They'd show up at practice. They'd get out of a surgery. They'd show up at practice. They always wanted to wrestle, and they always wanted to train. They loved being around their teammates. That was probably the biggest adjustment for me. Was the college kids a little different, right? You've got 22, 23-year-old, adults. So they may go to a great practice, and then you'd see them out at the bar at a restaurant sipping on a cocktail. So it was like, what is going on here? You have to live a certain lifestyle, championship lifestyle, to really be great. So that was a little bit different for me. I just thought, it was like Jackson. Everybody just grew up. They loved being a part of that program. That's truly how it was. You played football, you wrestled, and that was it. And that's all you did. And I didn't have to worry about that other stuff. Well, it became a whole nother animal. So that was probably the biggest thing. And then when you're in college, the academics is so important. So I always say this, the big three: socially, academically, athletically. And you have to be great in all three if you really want to be great. Now, you could be good, you could get away with it, you could win matches, but to be great, you got to be solid in all three of those, and you can't cut those corners. So when a kid's missing class and just deciding he doesn't have to go to class. There's nobody standing over him, get to class. It's not like you have 8 periods, right? You might have one class on a Tuesday. Well, it was a tough practice. I'm not going tonight. That was weird to me. Like, how do you not? I mean, I wasn't a brain surgeon. I was a 2.8 student, and that's probably fluffing it a little bit. But I never missed a class. I thought that's what you do. You have to. And I had 8 o'clocks every day. College, I never missed a class. So it was just weird to me how guys would skip and not care and be satisfied with C's, and if they're lucky, they're getting B's. So that was really, really difficult. They weren't competing in every area of their life. So that was really, really hard for me.
Right.
And that was probably the biggest adjustment. And I think everything changed when we recruited Anthony Ashnall. When I sat across from his dinner table and looked him in the eyes, and this is an 18-year-old kid, undefeated in high school wrestling at South Plainfield, won 4 state championships. His brother wrestled for me. His sister was our manager. He looked me in the eyes and basically, he didn't tell me what we needed to do, but he asked me really, really difficult questions about our program. And I was like, wow. And everything changed. Everything changed. Obviously, we get him, and that, again, another crazy story, getting Anthony Ashnall. But that's kind of where it started going, and the culture will never be the way any coach really always wants it. Yeah, it's super hard, those stories I tell you where guys will go sit, and that's still happening. They're 23 years old, and that's probably the hardest part, is to get a whole group of them to buy into your vision and what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So you get the job there. You've done some kind of out-of-the-box things, too, with the program. So talk about that a little bit. Like, you wrestled in the football stadium. You really branded the wrestling program, right, through social media.
Yeah, it had a lot to do with it.
You were supposed to go to the Yankee Stadium last year to wrestle, but they made the playoffs, so you guys kind of lost that.
Got screwed on that.
Yeah, you got screwed at the stadium. But talk about that a little bit. Some of the stuff that you brought in that maybe even really, at the time, the really big 10 schools weren't doing, and you're doing here at Rutgers, and now kids are going, wow.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that, because when I took the job, and I take this job very, very seriously, this part of it. When I said to you, I would say to my wife, we're going to make Rutgers wrestling so relevant that it's going to be on everybody's mind, in everybody's face. It's going to be where it's got to a nauseum, where either you love us or you hate us now, right? But I said, I'm going to make it where everybody knows what's going on that campus. And that was like my job. And the next, you fast forward a little bit. Now we got to start doing more. We're getting great crowds at the RAC. but I want more. And then I had this idea to wrestle outside. Iowa beats me to it. They do it with Oklahoma State the year before in front of 42,000 people. Number 1 versus 2 in the country in Kinnick Stadium, 42,000 people. I'm like, God, I wanted to do that. I wanted to beat them to that. But they beat me to it, and that's fine. We end up doing it next year. The people at Rutgers think I'm crazy. You're going to wrestle outside? November? How it doesn't make sense.
What if it rains? What if it's freezing cold?
So we decided to do it, and we put, thank God I asked Ryder to do it. They say no, they don't want to get involved in tickets. They don't want to help us sell tickets. There's nothing to do with Rutgers Wrestling. This is to keep wrestling, put wrestling on the forefront, make wrestling relevant, make wrestling great, and have everybody excited about wrestling. So it wasn't about, it was an event. It wasn't a dual meet with Ryder. So they say no. Princeton jumps on board, and they go at it. They're like us. They're relentless. Their energy, their passion. They go after fans. We're battling on the phone during the summer months trying to, who's going to call more high schools, who's going to get who. And next thing you know, there's 16,000 plus at a dual meet in the corner of the end zone. Sells out the whole corner bowl of the south end zone at Rutgers Stadium. It was sick. It was awesome. And it ends up being 63 degrees. Now, 6 hours later, a storm rolls in. We're playing Penn State in football. Storm rolls in, snow, sleet, hail, but we get 63 degrees. Great experience. Next year, we're going to Yankee Stadium. I'm like, we wrestle in Madison Square Garden. Getting ready to wrestle in Yankee Stadium. Like, who does that? Like, Bruce Springsteen does that. Billy Joel does that.
Right.
Scott Goodale's going to do that. He's going to coach in Yankee Stadium. I always wanted to do it because my grandfather coached at Forbes Field, coached at Ebbets Field, coached in Yankee Stadium. So I was like, man, that's awesome. When the Brooklyn Dodgers were here and the Giants were here before they moved out west, my grandfather would coach in those stadiums because he was at Far Rockaway High School. So I'm like, I'm going to get to play Madison Square Garden, which we've done already, and Yankee Stadium. So we go to Yankee Stadium. It's all set up, and our football program doesn't want to do it. Our season ticket holders don't want to do it. I'll never understand that. I really will never understand that. They want a home game, but you get a chance to play in Yankee Stadium. I don't care. You do it. That's just my philosophy. You just do it. Yeah. So one day, 30 years down the line, you could say you play. And our guys were all about it, and we still want to do it. But now I go to Game 5 with my son, and I'm like, I'm a huge Yankee fan, so obviously we're rooting for him to win, but I'm sitting with the guys running this event who are in charge of the Yankees as well. They're PR people, and they're like, 5th inning, this may not happen. We're probably not going to be able to do it because we got to set up for a parade. I go, parade? You're putting the horse before the cart, or what's the saying? You're putting the cart before the horse.
Cart before the horse, yeah.
I go, you're talking about winning the World Series already. And I'm like, there's so much more that went into it, though. You had to bring in a whole separate grass. Mm-hmm. Not artificial turf, but a brand new grass, a football grass, instead of the outfield. I didn't know that. I just thought you'd play right on that grass.
Play right on the outfield.
So they tell us it's not going to happen. We go right back into our stadium, and just again, I'm rambling here, but to think outside the box, everybody was excited for it. I get the question to this day, every day, when are you going to go back outside? What are you going to do next? Where are you going to go? So maybe it's the Intrepid, maybe it's Atlantic City, or not Atlantic City, I'm sorry, Asbury Park is something we're thinking about doing because they used to have the state wrestling championships there. There's a lot of different
The wrestlers think about that when they wrestle outside because wrestlers, they have their whole little thing they like to do, right? They're like weird a little bit.
Yeah.
So what do they think? They're going outside. It's 60, it's 40. Do they freak a little bit about that, or are they like pretty pumped just to do it?
You get that. It's weird. We prepare for it. So we'll go out leading up to both of those matches the last couple of years. We would go out Friday morning, 7 a.m., right? It's 40 degrees. It's chilly. Mm-hmm. And everybody goes singlet up, and we start, we work out. We obviously don't put a mat down, but it's turf grass, so we can wrestle. And we're practicing out there at 40 degrees at 7 a.m. So it's cold. They get a feel. We do a warm-up routine, and then, boom, we put our singlets on, and we start rolling, We start getting to what it's going to be like. And we always just talk. There's no distractions. This is what it is. It's going to be 40 degrees and cold. Actually, the last 2 years it was 62 degrees, so it worked out. But we can't use that as an excuse. And it was just they know it's an unbelievable opportunity again to put Rutgers wrestling in the forefront. Our guys believe in the same vision we believe in, so they want to do that. And that's kind of where it's at. And even those guys are like, "What are we doing next? Where are we going next?"
Yeah. So that's great. That's great that the kids are on board with it too. Because I could see some kids being like, "Nah, I don't want to do that." You know what I mean? I could see that in some of those guys. But if your guys want to do it, that's great. Before we get into this 2018-2019 season, let's talk a little bit about high school sports, the recruiting process, and your philosophy on kids specializing in that one sport athlete, which I disagree with 100%. I hate when you're telling a 14-year-old boy or girl,
Yeah.
hey, listen, you got to pick football, you got to pick baseball, you got to pick softball, you got to pick field hockey. So talk a little bit about your philosophy on like the specialization and the multi-sport athlete, and then we'll go into how you recruit and what you look for when you're recruiting a high school kid. Because I think the parents out there listening would be pretty interested in that.
I don't believe in a one-sport athlete. I mean, unfortunately, my sport, wrestling, that's what they're doing now. They get in these clubs and they give up everything. And I'll probably end up talking about my son quite a bit here because he's a perfect example. He's a high school sophomore who probably would like to wrestle, but he can't. He loves football and he loves baseball. And for him to wrestle and be able to be competitive, he'd have to go to club and he'd have to do it year round. That's just the way it's become. Mm-hmm. And these guys are doing it. Otherwise, he's going to lose a lot. And he doesn't want to do that, right? He's got too much pride to lose a lot. Even though all the benefits of wrestling are great, he doesn't want to do that. So he loves football. He loves baseball. Doesn't want to put the time in the offseason. He'd rather do those sports than wrestle. So wrestling's become so one-dimensional. Very rare do you see a two-sport. I love recruiting a two-sport athlete. A three-sport athlete's awesome, but they're just so few and far between. It just doesn't happen. I just think there's so much more. It's being around a different coach. It's being around another team. There's so much benefit to being in other sports, and I've always said that, and that's kind of why we've always done that with our children. And it's just the one sport. It's killing it. It's killing high school sports.
Yeah,
it's killing. You can't. What we did in 2006 and 2007, and we grabbed these kids out of the hallway. You can't do that anymore because they can't compete.
I was reading the stat this year's NFL draft. The first 32 in the NFL draft, like 26 of them were like multi-sport athletes in high school. 3 of them were like 3-sport athletes in high school. And I take a look at it. The Giuseppe kid, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, out of Southern.
Giuseppe,
football, basketball, volleyball, goes to Penn State.
I was a pro football player.
Got drafted by Miami.
He's going to be one of the best tight ends in the
He's playing for
league.
the Dolphins right now. 3-sport athlete in high school. So I talk to kids about it all the time in the hallways about, oh, well, I just got to play soccer. And I'm like, well, why can't you play soccer and basketball? Yeah. Well, my club coach says if I want to play on the club team. So you're making a 15-year-old kid who isn't developed yet, who, if you're taking a 15-year-old boy, like, it's just not the right thing to do by that kid. It might be the right thing to do for that club, but it's definitely not the right thing to do by the student. So talk about what you look for and the process you go through when you're recruiting a kid.
I look at all that. Like you're right. The club coach has killed sports. And listen, I know they're making a living, so I'm not. It's awesome, and they're great at what they do, and they may be. But like you said, why can't you do both? Why can't you do more? But it's. And I'll use soccer. You're right. You play for your high school team, and then you're on a club team. And the club team really probably takes precedent. I mean, I wouldn't know, but it probably takes precedent. So, I never understood that. I think that's hurting high school sports, of course. What I look for, obviously, we're in the Big Ten. I'm looking for the best wrestler. So I'm going to recruit a wrestler who's just wrestling. That's just the way it is. That's the way it's become. I'm not now. If I can get my hands on a football guy. If I can go watch a Friday night, watch him play football, but he's a pretty good wrestler, that's awesome. I love to have that kid for the reasons I stated. It's in our sport, again, it's few and far between. But for me, obviously we're looking for the best guys in the country because we have to compete with Penn State, Iowa, the best teams in the country. So we have to – you got to get the best guys. Yeah, right. You have to get the kid. But there's so much more to it. And this, if I could get anything across today to parents who are listening, the character part of it, is so much. It's so important. Let's say, for example, we're recruiting a 149-pounder. Now, you got your 5%ers, right? We just happen to get the number 1 kid in the country this year, right? He's a 5%er. Mm-hmm. Those are they're rare, right? They're rare. Penn State's getting more 5%ers than we are. Ohio State's getting more 5%, but we're getting them, but they're rare. The rest of the guys, and there are a million of them.
Right.
There's a million guys ranked 10th in the country, right? You're going to find a guy ranked 10th in the country, 11th in the country. There's a million. So what separates you? Are you a 2-sport athlete? That helps. But your character, how you are around your teammates, we're always going to go to the high school coach. So they think it's all about club. No, we're always going to talk to a high school coach. How are you around your teammates? How do you train? How do you prepare? And then for us, the most important thing is home visits. How you treat your parents. That's that's my philosophy. I need to see you in your house. I need to sit down at your table if we're really, really serious about you. The guys we've recruited and the guys we've gotten, let's say just this year, I've been in their houses. I've seen how they, and will we take a chance on a live wire? Yeah, we'll take a chance on a live wire, but our recruiting philosophy has changed a lot. because you have to be able to. I talked about the big three early on: socially, academically, and athletically. You have to be solid in all three if you're going to succeed with this schedule and in our program. If you're going to cut corners, you're never really. It doesn't matter how good you are, you're just not going to make it. So understand this: no matter how good you are and how many titles you win at the high school level, there's so much more to it that goes into it, and it's not just wrestling. So the home visits are really, really important.
So talk a little bit about that home visit. You ring the doorbell, Coach Goodale.
Well, they know we're coming. Yeah, they know we're coming. Sometimes I'll go by myself. A lot of times I'll go with a staff member. But for me, it's their lifestyle. They live in a championship lifestyle. Listen, I know every high school kid isn't the same, and I know they're different, but I've been in some awesome houses, and I've been in some crazy houses. And what's weird, and probably the weirdest thing I do, is always ask to see someone's room.
So you asked to go in their bedroom?
Oh, yeah. We'll get through, obviously what they're cooking is pretty important to me, too. Are we going to eat? Are we not going to eat? Listen, we've showed up not knowing in the early years, are we going to eat at this house or not? Coach Leo and I would stop off at a restaurant, fill our bellies up, then we'd go in. Next thing you know, we're at an Italian mom's house. So that's stupid on us. How are we not? They're definitely going to cook for us. So I'll never forget Anthony Pafumi's house, and she came out with it was like a 7-course meal. Italian family, 7-course meal. Meanwhile, we just had a burger and a beer down the road, and I got this 7. You got to eat it.
You got to eat it.
You got to eat it.
Italian mom ain't going to let you get up from that table.
So. But yeah, I always ask, after, we start eating and have a meal, and then I'll say, yeah, man, let's take a walk. Where do you live? And I always check their room. And it's a lot of it's cool because you get these brackets from high school when all these kids are really, really little, who they wrestled, and at Bantam 65. But then you get some rooms. I've walked in and walked right out and said, we got to go. Just based on what's hanging on their walls.
Did your eyes light up? Did her eyes light up a little bit when you go, let me see your bedroom?
I think some of them probably heard all this stuff before, probably know what's coming, but, yeah, probably a little bit. I don't know if they get uncomfortable, but it starts by showing me the house, and you can't just sit there for 3 hours, And,
yeah.
But this one recruit we had, and I can't use his name because of NCAA rules, he takes us down to his basement this past spring, and we go in his basement, and it's full of water bottles and just hardcore weights, him and his dad lift. And I said, we got to get this guy. We have to get this guy. Look at this. This is a dungeon. It's like our wrestling room. And he comes down here and just throws around iron and trains. And then he takes us up in his attic. And there's his dad was a boxer. And there's boxing bags hanging up and ropes from the attic. Mm-hmm. I'm like, we have to get this kid. Just based on the way he trains and prepares and lives his life, we have to get him. And so we do a lot of that. There's been times just the way a kid speaks to his parents, we get up and leave, Hey, listen, I got a phone. And those hurt because you spend so much time recruiting. But if they can't talk to their parents, what are they going to do to us at a big spot?
Right.
Right. So all that stuff matters.
Does that conversation get a little weird when you're like...
Well, no. There's been times I faked the phone call. Hey, listen, my wife, I got something at home. I got to run. It's been awesome. And then, you just stop calling. That's just the way it is because, again, that's changed. Back in the day, I would take, if you can wrestle, I would take you. And it's got me jammed up, It's got me jammed up. So a character of so much. Now, again, like I said, will we take a chance on a live wire? I think for us, our philosophy is you got to be willing to work. And that sounds really, really easy. You got to be a hard worker. Well, everybody's a hard worker.
At that level, everybody works hard.
Everybody, especially at 3 o'clock, right? We're going to have today's practice at 3, everybody will work hard. Because you'll get lost, you'll get crushed, you'll get run out of the room if you don't. But what are you doing the rest of your time? Are you working out in the morning? Are you doing stuff at night? Do you come across our desk? Are you on point with everything? You can tell so much through the recruiting process. If the parents are speaking for the kids, you got problems.
Yeah, you
got problems. So I look at all that. I evaluate everything, and there's been some interesting. I'll tell you a quick story because a lot of people I'm sure have heard this story, but we had a kid commit to us, and he trained with us. He went on and won a junior national title. And as he was going through the junior nationals out in Fargo, he lost a match. But they all beat each other. 3 guys beat each other, so it was a round robin. He had the most points. When he lost his match, I guess he felt pressure from the whole recruiting thing. On the floor at the Fargo Dome, he calls us. We're there. He calls us in the dome. He's like, I just want to commit to Rutgers. I can't handle all this. I feel like every time I'm wrestling, people, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, he commits to Rutgers. Then he has the most points. He goes on and wins junior nationals. So we're going to have this Fargo national champ, probably our biggest recruit we'd ever gotten next to Winston. So now he wins Fargo. Now every other coach is on him. Now we have to go down and do a home visit. So I go down and do a home visit, get through meal, great meal. My college roommate is his high school coach. I think we're still going to get this kid. He's my high school coach, blah, blah. So I said, hey, man, let me check your room. He goes like, yeah, come on up, coach. I go up in his room and Iowa wrestling all over. Pictures of Gable, brands, the Iowa mentality, the Iowa way. I said, let's go. I didn't even get it. I didn't even make it to the apple pie. I said, we're out of here.
No apple pie.
We ain't getting this guy. Sure enough, he went on and wrestled at Iowa. Had a pretty good career at Iowa. Ashnolt's beaten him before, so it kind of worked out for us. But that's the business. That's the and these guys growing up, it's Penn State, it's Iowa, now it's Ohio State, and you got to fight that. That's been the hardest thing being in the Big Ten. Everybody asks, well, has recruiting been easier? Well, we're on the best kids in the country because they want to be in the Big Ten, but you're also recruiting against the best guys. So
you're recruiting against the best kids in the Big Ten. Let's talk a little bit before we talk about this 2018-2019 season. Let's talk a little bit about how your year goes. When does it ramp up? When are you slow? Like right now, obviously, you just guys opened up this weekend. You had a quad at the Rack this weekend. Yep. So talk a little bit about how your season as a coach starts from like slow time to busy time to kind of like where you are right now. And then we'll pick up with our lineup for this year.
Yeah. I think when I started this thing when I told you earlier, like it never ends. It's visiting all these schools. It never ends. That's like, when does it stop? It never stops. Recruiting never ends, first of all. And our program now we have days where we're only practicing maybe 2 days a week in the summer, but that doesn't mean we're not going to visit people. We're not going to national tournaments. We have camps 3 weeks out of the summer, 2-3 weeks depending on the year out of the summer. We're constantly doing satellite camps, so it never really slows down. We start our preseason right when we get back in September. Maybe August. We'd like them to get away from us a little bit.
Just to relax.
Our staff gets away. Yeah, we're really good about. I got a staff, and I probably should have mentioned him earlier, but
talk about him a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, John Leonardo, so I said, has been with me day one. I think our program, and John would admit this, our program changed when we hired Donnie Pritzloff. He's the best coach in the country. I truly, truly believe that. That's when it all kind of changed 6 years ago when we hired him. Parati was an All-American and picked up the phone, called Donnie. He was at Michigan, never thought he would leave, but he's a Jersey guy, so why not? Give it a shot. I feel good about myself. We just had an All-American. I don't have to hear that crap anymore. Can't have All-Americans. I said, you know what? I'm going to call Pritzloff. And sure enough, he didn't say no. He didn't say no. So we went through the whole recruiting process, brought him in, and recruited the heck out of him. Probably the best recruit I've ever gotten. But he comes and changes everything. And then Joe Pollard's been with me for 7 or 8 years, and now is our director of wrestling operations. So we got so much. We started this thing with John and myself, Frankie Egger part-time. Now we have 4 guys on staff. Brian Murphy's our volunteer. Joe Pollard's our director of wrestling operations. Harry Turner, a local kid from Howell, New Jersey. He went to Lock Haven and wrestled. Came back. Now he's our recruiting coordinator / student developer. We have our own strength coach. We have our own trainer. We have our own equipment guy. It's like we got a staff of 12 people.
One of the things I think you were good at doing when you were in Jackson was making everybody, whether it was the custodian or the nighttime guy, feel like they were part of that wrestling program. And I know you're doing the same thing at Rutgers. So talk a little bit about that, because I know when you and I shared an office, you would always talk to me. The big thing was on Friday nights, you'd tell me the first play of the game, and you'd be like, you can't tell anybody. I'm like, Scott, I won't tell anybody. Just tell me what the first play of the game is. What are you running? And like, when you had the big wrestling match coming up, if you were bumping weights around, I'm like, Scott, what's everybody doing? You're like, you can't tell anybody. I'm like, Scott, I want to hear it. I'm not telling anybody because I want to know next week what's going on. So I felt like I was on the staff when I was sharing that office with you. And you're like, everybody's going up. I'm like, no way, you're bumping everybody up. You're like, don't tell anybody. And I was like, he's not bumping everybody up. I'm like, there's no way in the world he's bumping everybody up. And then I go to that wrestling match and everybody's up a weight. I'm like, he wasn't lying in the office. So that's one of the things I think you're good at, is making everybody feel like they're part of that program. So what are some of the things you do up at Rutgers to do that?
It's the same way, man. Nothing changes. We have a group of people that clean our wrestling room. You know, what great people that are going to come and clean that wrestling room twice a day. So they're like beautiful people. They're awesome people. Our equipment manager, what kind of, right? You're doing socks and jocks. For 30 years he's been doing it, JR. He's the nicest guy in the world. Son goes there, plays baseball. Those guys are part of your vision. And some of them are girls. They're part of our vision. They're part of what we need to do. For us to be successful, we need a clean room. We need a clean locker room. It's got to be a place you could bring recruits and parents in and say, wow, this is something. Now we're getting a brand new facility coming. But everybody's important. Our announcer is important. Even at Jackson, you and I would wait to hear game time temperature from Jim Colbert. Yeah. That's an important guy. He's invited to everything. He's part of your program. The guys running the clocks and all those guys, our managers, they're super important in what you're trying to do, because you can't get things done without them. So, You know, I had again my college roommate, Council Rock South, Brad Sillenperry, is a really, really good friend of mine. He calls it the power of the T-shirt. And I think we're both kind of doing the same thing. I just never had that in my head, the power of the T-shirt. Well, everybody in that facility is wearing Rutgers wrestling gear. Anytime I can give out a shirt, I personally we buy shirts, and we have boxes and boxes of shirts. And if we can get through wrestling camp with Gibson, not taking him home to his kids, that's a whole nother story. But we give these shirts, and anybody who's involved or is excited about our program, we get them gear. We give them shirts. We make them important. You know, they're a part of it. We never say no to a photo opportunity. I mean, I'm not even embarrassed to say it. I think it's awesome. But I've had like married ladies crying this past weekend to get a picture with Nick Suriano, literally crying because her kids can take a picture with Nick. I mean, and Anthony has that same, and Nick Gravina have that same kind of aura about him now up there. But those people are important. So when they say we don't want anybody on the floor, we would say to them, this isn't basketball. We want our fans on the floor. After a wrestling match, it's wrestling. Yeah. They don't get that notoriety. So let all these fans come on the floor. Let them come down. So they come down, and our guys are super good, win or lose, taking pictures with these little ones. And my wife always told me this when it was really, really hard 12 years ago, and I was thinking, what did I do? We're 0-3. We're getting beat. First 3 duels, I think it was 100-4. We won 1 match in the first 3 duels. I'm like, why would I ever leave Jackson for this, you know? And she's like, listen, you'll notice this 10, 12 years down the line when every kid growing up is wearing Rutgers wrestling gear, and they want to be a part of it. Yeah. And that's kind of, and that has nothing to do with me. That's just everybody involved in it. But that's kind of what has started to happen. And we got kids that want to come and wrestle at Rutgers, and I don't say this in a bad way, but it's a great problem to have, but it's also a bad problem to have because they may not be at that level we're trying to get to. And now you got to tell a kid whose dream is to go wrestle at Rutgers because they grew up at the rack watching all these great matches that, listen, you know, I don't know if you're going to be able to wrestle here. We'd love to have you. And that's probably the hardest part. We're only allowed to carry 30, and they better be pretty good for us to compete. So
I think when you find good coaches or people at that high level, is they're all just like nice dudes, and I think you're a nice dude and everybody likes you. Sometimes it's hard when you're as good as you are or doing what you do, people start to they like, I don't like that dude anymore because he thinks he's too big for his britches or whatever the case might be. Like my boy Ming behind the cameras right now, he's been helping me out with the podcast. I met with him once in the summer and today, and he's like the nicest guy in the world, and he's like in his world he's a pretty big deal. And you would never know, like he's giggling a little bit right now. But so I think when you meet people that are doing stuff that are good dudes, they're always more than willing to help out. They're always positive, right, when they're around people.
Yeah, I always and this sounds probably corny, but I always just want to serve our guys. You know, I always want to serve people. I always want them to make them feel like whatever experience it is, whether it's a fan coming to the rack or a donor who's found something they can really, you know, hold on to. I want to make them, and it's not fake. It's not fake. It's genuine. I love having conversations. I love people, but I love serving our guys. I love serving the fans. I love serving our administration. I love the fact we have our athletic departments into wrestling. I'm just super into that. And I don't know. I just think it's a great experience. I think it's such a good time to be a Rutgers wrestling fan. And I just know that place is dying for something and something really, really successful, and I want to give it to them. And I don't know. That's just kind of the way I live my life. And, again, it has nothing to do with just me. There's so many other people behind it. But I go through my life every single day, like, who am I going to take care of today? Like, we got to make sure. And that's probably, you know, you asked earlier, what's the hardest part about your job? You never know what a kid's going through.
No.
You never know. And if you're just going to be a coach and it's my way or the highway and we're going to run through a wall and we're going to be tough, those days are over.
Yeah,
like, there's
really
so much more. And that's the best part of my job, is getting to know these guys when it's difficult, is getting to know what's going on at home. My job is to know what's happening with their siblings. And people think I'm crazy. Why do you want to know all that? Because it's important. I want to know brothers and sisters, moms and dads, grandparents, where they work, where they're from. And I think our staff does a really, really good job of that. It's so much more than just wrestling.
Yeah, like even today, you know, like just having you come in to be the first guest on the show, like I appreciate that. And when we bumped into I think that we bumped into at the school or something, and I told you I was doing this.
Yeah, you're always doing something crazy, though. So I never know if it's real, if it's not real.
No,
you're racing cars, you're playing tennis. I don't know what you're doing.
No, I know you're right. But I was a little nervous asking you. It was like asking my prom date out. Like, what if he says no? You know what I mean?
I would never say no.
I know.
Come on.
I know. You were like so on board. But I had to think in my head a little bit. It's my first show. Nobody knows what I'm doing. Who's kind of crazy enough to come on? And I bumped into you. So, like, that worked out for me. So I do appreciate you coming in today, being the first guest. Let's talk a little bit about this year and your lineup. So who we got at like 125 right now?
Yeah, so So, I mean, we're a week in, and it's pretty clear that Suriano's moved up to 133 pounds. He's a national finalist. Obviously, he's one of the best kids in the country. Pound for pound, he's great. And so with him leaving, Shane Metzler it started the year off at 125, but we have this backup. We have this, no, I shouldn't say backup. That's not the right word. We have this kid redshirting from California, Nick Aguilar, who are we going to pull him out of red shirt? See, again, there's so much more to it than just wrestling, and it's constant dialogue. Do we pull him out of red shirt? Do we not pull him out of red shirt? Do we keep him there for the future? Shane's really, really good. For now, he'll stay in red shirt, and we'll wrestle Metzler. And we think Shane's really good. He won us dual meets last year at Wisconsin and Princeton. Literally won us the Wisconsin duel. And then if you know our program for Donnie Pritzoff, that's a big deal. He's a Wisconsin alum. So Suriano was hurt. Metzler steps in. He pins the kid who we've never beaten before. He does that. So Shane's our guy right now. We're good with that. We're going forward, and we just got to get him better and get him prepared for this Big Ten season. 141, I talked about Suriano, obviously one of the faces of our program and around the country. 141, Mikey Van Brill's back, really getting pushed by Pete Lipari. Two really, really good guys who on any given day could probably beat each other and can win at a high level. So they wrestled as freshmen last year. Pete was a sophomore. He wrestled back up behind Mike. But Mikey wrestled in the Big Tens as a freshman, which was a really good learning curve for him. And then we get our guy back. You know, we get Anthony Anschnall back at 149, so that's awesome. And Anthony's been – I've said it before, the face of our program. He's turned the whole program around. Such a great ambassador, not only for Rutgers Wrestling, but for Rutgers University.
Just a good dude.
Just a good dude, like somebody you want around your kids. And that's, you know, going back to recruiting, that's really, it comes down to now where we're at in the program. You want to be able to get kids in your program you could bring around your children. And that just doesn't go for my children, but Donnie's and John's and Coach Pollard. So that's one of those guys. And you always want to be around him. And he's going to be a great coach. We're hoping he stays with us. He better stay with us.
Yeah, let's hope so, right?
That's the plan. But just an awesome kid and a great family. 157, another great kid, Johnny Van Brill, Mikey's brother. They come from a great wrestling family down South Jersey, Clearview. Johnny probably had the most roller coaster ride of anybody in our team last year. He's up 8-5 to be an All-American at the national tournament, and the clock stops. The clock just breaks, it stops. So then the guy from Arizona State gets time, we get time. We're like, listen, you're up 8-5. Like, this is over. You're going to be on. That's what we're thinking. And he gives up a 3-point lead with 18 seconds. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. So that was crushing, but he meets it head on, and you know, he's an All-American type guy, and he's just got to win that match. But you know, it's a hard thing to come back from, but he'll do it. And then 165 is probably the most anticipated debut was Steph Glasgow last week. Everybody was waiting for Steph. Number one kid in the country coming out 2 years ago. Took a prep year at St. Benedict's. Came back to us this year. He's up at 165, most athletic kid I've ever coached by far. Again, so much more goes into it. Your hygiene, your nutrition, your sleep habits, how you're managing your academics. If he can control all that and do a good job, which he is so far, he could be super, super special.
Now, is he kind of in that national ranking scene yet?
He just got a national ranking, yeah. The first one was the other day. He's number 20 in the country right now, and he wrestles number 15 this weekend. So he'll always – that's the one good thing about our schedule, right? You'll always have opportunities to move up just based on who we wrestled. Right. That being said, you always have chances to get knocked off.
Move down as well.
So – but he's super, super gifted. Joe Grella, 174, with Willie Scott, who's a local kid from Brick. Willie Scott does a great job, you know, going 74, 84, even 97. But Joe Grella's our starter at 74, two-time New Jersey State champ at a Bergen Catholic. Had a really good freshman year last year, but he didn't qualify for the national tournament, so there's a sour taste with him. He's had probably out of everybody, our best offseason. He's had the best offseason.
He's a little hungry now after that?
Yeah, I think so. He's a quiet kid, so he'll never say it, but he's trained at an unbelievable pace and a great level, and he's going to have a good year. 184 to start the year will be Jordan Pagano. Nick Gravina was granted a 6 years, had a shoulder surgery. He's just starting now to get back into it. Whether he comes back or not will be up to Nick Gravina, but right now it's Jordan Pagano, who's a fifth-year guy. He's been with the program. He's won some big matches for us, certainly capable of doing some really good things. So we don't really take a step. You know, Nick Gravina is a three-time All-American, but we don't take much of a step down there. 197, Matt Correnti is a national qualifier, redshirted last year. He was actually beaten his wrestle-off by Max Wright. So there's a weight we kind of have depth.
You have some depth there.
Yeah, we have some depth there, which we don't have a lot of depth, you know, across the board. It's we're very top-heavy, which you kind of want to get depth, but there's some weights like 57, 65. We don't even have a backup right now. So that could be dangerous. You got to stay healthy. But those two guys will go 97. And we got a transfer at heavyweight, Christian Colucci from Lehigh. So from top to bottom, it's a very, very, very solid lineup. It's November, a lot of wrestling. Our guys are going to get better. They're going to get banged up. We're going to have to be really, really smart with their bodies. Health and staying healthy is the most important thing. But I think if this team enters the Big Ten tournament in March, we'll have a great March, and that's always the goal in this sport.
Yeah, and that was kind of my lead in what your team expectations are for the end of the year in March, and then some individual expectations. I know you got Anthony coming back as a 3-time All-American. Mm-hmm. You got Nick Suriano coming back as a runner-up last year at 125 pounds. So it looks good for March. It looks good right now.
Yeah, on paper it looks great, but it's about staying healthy. And that's like I was always, you know me, I'm so into these dual meets. I love the dual meets. My mind's kind of shifted a little bit to the national tournament because I see how it affects recruiting and how important it is. But yeah, we got some really good kids that could make a run at this thing. And from an individual standpoint, it looks great on paper. You know, getting them there healthy, it could be an unbelievable March. And we don't really. It's crazy. I never ask. This is just my philosophy. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I never ask a kid what their goal is now, especially the freshmen, right? What are they going to tell you? I want to win a national title. I want to be a national champ. Well, does your lifestyle match up to your goal? So I'll wait until late December after the Midlands tournament usually, and then we'll have individual meetings and say, okay, what is your goal now? You can't tell me you want to be a national champ if you're failing classes or you're missing practices, you're missing lifts, you're missing extra runs. You can't do that. If you're not even in the lineup, how are you going to win a national title? You got to make your team first.
Right.
So a lot changes, and the same thing with our team. We have expectations. They're there. They're there from the wrestling community. They're there from the New Jersey community. Around the country, they're there. But I think if you were to ask our leaders, because I don't have captains, but if you ask our leaders like Ravina and Anthony and even Nick or Jordan or Mikey Van Brill or Johnny Van Brill, they want to win a trophy. I know when Anthony decided to come here, it was his goal to make Rutgers wrestling great. And if you asked him, I would assume he'd say, I think we have the ability to win a trophy at the national tournament. And that's top 4 in the country. That's a hell of a tournament you're going to have.
That's a great tournament.
That's a hell of a tournament. And we were close. Last year we were 7-8 the whole, and then we get bounced. We didn't win a match the last day. We only had Del Vecchio was in the All-American rounds, and obviously we lost the final with Nick, but we could have been 7th or 8th.
It's tough keeping kids healthy. I have that talk all the time with the coaches at our place. Like, they're like, we're so good. I'm like, everything has to go your way. Yeah. From every bounce of the ball, game of inches, right? Hits the post or goes in. The kid runs in bounds, kid catches the ball out of bounds. Then it's the difference in the touchdown. Everything has to go your way in the wrestling season. 6 months. How long's your season? 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
So everything has to go your way for 6 months, and that's hard to do for anybody, not just a college kid. For the pros, you know what I mean. That's a hard thing to do. Is stay healthy and everything go your way. The academic piece, the social piece.
You got to manage it, and it's an everyday job. You have to manage it. You got to be able to do it, and it's never going to change, right? The sport's a brutal sport. Guys are going to get hurt. Things are going to happen. I'm freaked out about this weekend. 2 dual meets. Nobody cares about what's going to happen in November.
Yeah.
But I'm competitive. I want to win at everything. That's just the way I am, and that's the way our staff is, and we want to win. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if we have to sit a kid out because of an injury, and I'm not saying we're doing that this weekend, but if we have to, we have to.
Yeah.
As long as we're prepared for March. And nobody remembered last year when we lost to Illinois out in Illinois. We sat 4 or 5 guys out, whether it was injury, sickness, skin. Mm-hmm. Nobody remembers that. They remember we were 7th, 8th, 9th the last day at the national tournament, and then the 174-pounder from Arizona State won national title, and we ended up 11th in the country. That's what they remember.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Everything has to happen. It doesn't matter the level. It doesn't matter whether it's college, high school, recreation. Things got to work in your favor. You got to get a little bit you got to have some luck.
You got to have some luck.
No doubt about it.
I'd rather be lucky than good.
Yep. So that all goes into it, and that's part of it.
What I hope to do is have you guys back in like April. Have you back, maybe a couple of the kids.
That'd be awesome.
Some of the All-Americans, hopefully, right? Hopefully. Mm-hmm. I'm going to let you get out of here. I've got one last question for you because you're so high energy. You're always on the go. This is our last question today, and then we'll wrap it up. What's Scott Goodale do to relax?
Golf.
Loves
golfing. If I could golf every day of my life, and you and I used to play together, I play a lot. I play a lot of golf. Here's the thing. At Rutgers, the football coach doesn't golf. The basketball coach doesn't golf. But all these and there's so many nice courses in New Jersey. So all these donors are like, and our athletic director golfs. We hear the wrestling coach golfs. So now it's become a point. I go all over and play these great courses. And that's not even relaxing because I'm trying to win that too. You know, I mean, we have matches, but I'm not a beach guy. My wife loves the beach. I could sit there I'll go down to Seaside Park. Within an hour, I'm down at Bum Rogers. I just can't sit there. It does nothing for me.
Yeah.
I like to golf, and I like to say hanging out with my kids, it's relaxing, but they're at the point now they don't want to hang out with dad. So I don't even do that anymore, you know? So, but I love being a dad. That's the coolest part. You know, just talking about that real quick, and I know we have to end this, but that would be the one advice I would give the parents who are going through this whole not only recruiting process, but going into the process of middle school to high school sports is just be a parent. Like, just be the parent. You're not the coach. Just be the parent. And that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing for me to do. You don't think I want to get in the car ride home? And I say this all the time. A lot of careers have been ended on the car ride home. You don't think I want to get in that car and be like, why didn't you get over the top of that? Why didn't you field that punt? What are you doing letting the kid from Freehold Township catch that ball in front of you? Jump that, knock it down. They can't kick a field. I want to say that.
Yeah.
I want to kill because I watch my kid from the stands and I watch him wrestle. I watch him play baseball. I want to do that, but my only advice is just be a parent. I love being a parent. It's the coolest thing. I got a 17-year-old daughter who's awesome, super smart, beautiful, has a boyfriend. I tried to shake him up a little bit. I love the kid.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work either. He's such a nice kid. He's a baseball player. So I love being a parent. I guess I do that to relax. I love being around my kids, but probably golfing and just hanging out at home with my family is probably the coolest thing I do.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I have he's going to be 4 in January, and I just think it's the coolest thing. Like, having a kid at home and all that stuff that goes along with it.
Are you done? Or are you gonna work on?
The old lady wants another one. I'm good. I'm good.
You got to go 2. At least go boy. Once you go boy and girl, then you could be done.
Yeah. No,
the problem is if you get 2 of the same, you're gonna want to go 3.
Yeah, then you got to go 3.
And then the next thing you know, you're turning into 4 and becomes a circus.
Yeah, I'm too old. I think I'm too old for that.
That's no good.
All right, Scott. Listen, I know you got to get out of here. You got to go do your stuff. Good luck. Who you got this weekend, real quick?
Utah Valley, and first we'll wrestle App State, ranked 25th in the country. Utah Valley after, so we go 12-2 up in Schenectady, New York.
All right. Good luck this weekend, Scott. Once again, thank you so much for coming in today. I appreciate it. All right.
You're the man, Uppy.
No, you're the man. I can't be the heck of the man. You're the man. Thank you so much for coming in. No, I appreciate it, guys. Have a good day, everybody. We'll see you next time.